My name is Diadona. I'm representing the Orthos Club, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies for today's webinar. We are also joined by our colleague Aya, and she will be doing a live illustration of the discussion as we go, and we will make sure to give a spotlight later for everyone to see an illustrated summary of the session. And of course, the event wouldn't be possible without someone supporting it, and in today's case, we are very lucky to have Thoughtworks for giving us the opportunity to bring everyone together for this exciting webinar today. We will be hearing more from them later on, but for today's program, I would like to touch briefly upon the agenda, as in a few minutes, we will have a short presentation from our host, Thoughtworks, and this discussion will last approximately 1 hour, so let's make the most out of it. Just a couple of rules before we start. This session will be recorded, so should anyone want a copy afterwards for those who are not able to make it, we will be able to share it upon request. Of course, basic virtual rule, please make the most out of question and answers feature to ask the panel any question you might have. And with that, I'd like to introduce our amazing moderator for today, Nimisha from Thoughtworks. Nimisha, take it away.
Thank you so much, Diadona. Hello, everybody. My name is Nimisha Astagiri. I also go by Nim. I've been at Thoughtworks for almost 3 years later this year, based in the Boston area. I'm really looking forward to moderating our wonderful panelists today. Thoughtworks, as many of you may know, it's a global technology consultancy. It integrates strategy, design, and engineering to drive innovation and digital transformations for our clients. We have about over 10,500 thought workers across 48 offices in 19 countries. And we've helped our clients solve complex business problems and technologies along the way. So today, what we'll be covering, we'll be talking about data governance. We're talking about data as a product. And as you know, with the advent of artificial intelligence and generative AI in our organizations, at our clients, at our customers, there is a lot of attention on making sure we have a strong data foundation. And data governance is a key component to that. And also, there's been an advent in thinking about data as a product. So today, I'm really appreciative of having our panelists today, my esteemed colleagues. So we have Tian Kai here from Thoughtworks. He's a data strategist and data governance lead in Thoughtworks Europe. And we have Prashant here from Microsoft. He is a senior cloud solution architect at Microsoft Global Partner Solutions in America. So Tian Kai, why don't you introduce yourself and then Prashant.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Tian Kai. I'm based in Munich, Germany. And as Nim just said, I'm the data strategy and data governance lead here in Europe. And what that means is that I basically look into the approaches and the offerings we have around data strategy and data governance services, with, I think, the specialty of looking more into how data governance in a value-driven and computational sense would look like, and especially in terms of having more decentralized landscapes and data products, how data governance can be applied.
Hello, everyone. My name is Prashant. I'm a cloud solution architect, part of Global Partner Solutions at Microsoft. And my focus area is data and AI and helping customers and partners getting maximum out of their data. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, let's get started because we have a packed discussion here, a lot of great things to unpack together. So I would like to welcome both of our panelists, and we'll start with Tian Kai. Let's first make sure we're all kind of on the same page of what is data as a product. So if you can just define that for us, unpack it, and then that will help us get started.
Sure. I think when it comes to data as a product, there's the technical view and a little bit the more business and strategic view on it. I think when we go back to the data mesh book written by Jamak, right, about how data as a product is defined, it really defines it as an architectural quantum, and it defines how you have basically input ports, output ports, and kind of that domain-driven design around it as a concept and as a modular concept. But me having worked actually many years in the retail and manufacturing industry, I have also a very literal sense of what product thinking means. And that means, for example, to think about the target audience, the return on investment on a product, or also the life cycle of a product, as well as basically the ownership of a product. And I think when we talk about data as a product, all of that really nicely comes together, right? How can we attach value to a data product? How can we ensure that it has a life cycle, how it's owned, and how it's basically being as reusable as possible as well?
Great. Prashant, would you like to add any other perspectives or insights
Yeah,
to that?
yeah. So I think having a logical construct on top of the technical assets, that's very key. And that's where the data product comes in. So far we have been dealing with a lot of kind of a technical assets or technical aspects, right? But at the end, we want to empower the business users kind of whenever they do the discovery of data and everything, right? So I think the data product helps from a logical construct on top of that kind of a technical assets, right? And also not only just a discovery, but whenever like from the access management and those data democratization, all of that, data as a product thinking brings in on the table actually. So, yeah.
And just so we all have also a visual of like, okay, things, what is data as a product? Is there a specific example or like how big is a data product? How small is it? I'm wondering if maybe Tiankai, if you can give maybe something concrete of what does that data product look like? Because there's been different definitions over the course of the years. Yes.
That is very true. I think, data products and how you slice and dice it and kind of just how you pack it together is really an important choice to make. You also have the choice that if you want to bring value to it, how many data products do you kind of differentiate into, right? We often talk about these three types of data products. You have the source aligned data products, the aggregated data products, and the consumer aligned data products, right? And I think thinking in that kind of layered approach makes a lot of sense, where you have like first the more raw but harmonized first version of it, then a little bit of a aggregated version of it, and then the real ready to use version of it. But in the end, right, slicing, dicing it into different data products to make sure that they all work together, that requires what we call a portfolio process, right? Thinking about the bigger aspect of how data products all work together, how do they interact with each other, and how do they actually lead into the value that Prashant just mentioned from a business user point of view. So yeah, I don't think I can give like a generic answer how big a data product should be, but I think there are a lot of approaches to make it in a better informed way. Yes.
Awesome. And so, it might be like hundreds of attributes or dozens of attributes within a data product. And then I can imagine organizations with hundreds or thousands of data products as well. And so when you have that landscape now of that portfolio, as you said, really, how do we govern that? So, so Prashant, if you can start us off with thinking about the role of data governance and what is that value of data governance? How does that play when we're thinking about that entire portfolio of data products in an organization?
Yeah, so let's think the critical like a business requirement and business priorities, right? For most of the organizations, I think the big thing is what data do I have, right? That's the very big kind of a question, right? And even though let's see if I identify like what data do I have the context and inventory of all of that data? That's the second thing, right? And the other thing is the data access management. So most of the time I talk to CDOs and the top of mind, what I'm seeing is the data is kind of access dependent on a specific person, or it's kind of managed based on some spreadsheet, right? So there are no kind of data collaborations, right? Data sharing, those kind of mechanisms available. And that's where the data governance comes in, help you achieving the data democratization culture and all the aspects. So I see that's where the data governance, comes and helps getting the value out of your data actually.
Got it. Okay. And what about in terms of communicating that value also to senior leaders? Like where are you seeing if you were to articulate that value that you just shared to a senior leader, what do you think would resonate with them?
I think the key thing is the nominating the executive sponsorship. That's the very first thing. So you should really have someone like a champion or executive sponsorship. There are different patterns like top down or kind of bottom up, right? Sometimes you see the one domain is more kind of, advanced versus other. So you can replicate that learnings to the other domains. And I see, again, it's a culture kind of a thing. So I have seen the trend like they plan the gamification kind of a thing. So let's say you have a weekly or monthly check-ins with your domain team, like, hey, how they are doing. Or maybe with the use of some tools, what you can do is like, you can have a visibility like, hey, what are the, how is the domain look like the health of the domains, right? So we have OKRs, like which you can attach to the, specific governance solutions, or you can manage the health, right? So using all of these features, right, you can do that communication, education, and awareness actually.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And Tiankai, what unpack that even further for us? So like, what do you see in terms of the roles and responsibilities of different individuals when it comes to governing data products?
Yes, absolutely. And I think when we talk about roles and responsibilities, the biggest pain point and the most critical part of governance is always ownership, right? And I think with ownership, I think often it ties to data ownership, which is, I think, the traditional sense of basically data governance. But in data product world, and especially in a more decentralized world, there's a lot more ownership that is basically having different distributed responsibilities. So we start with data products having to have ownership, right? Basically treating data as a product. You have a product manager and a product owner of it. But you also have the target audience and the target user base that is use case owners, right? So they actually need to own their requirements and they need to be clear about what they request from a basic data product. But then it goes back basically to the technical side, right? So the data product is built on a data platform, which is owned by someone. So the data platform should enable what the data product should supposed to do. And the data platform is ingesting data from source systems that are also owned by someone. So in the end, you actually have that ecosystem and chain of owners, and overarchingly, you have that data ownership, or in the data mesh sense, we also call it data domain ownership, right? Where actually somebody is overseeing it end to end from a business lens to ensure that data is basically made the right decisions about across the whole value chain. But then when issues happen, that it can actually be tied to each of the owners to make clear what they need to do and what is there. And I think, I mean, with data quality, let's say, being one of the key use cases of data governance, that is where a lot of the attention lies. That is also where the link to AI, for example, lies, because garbage in, garbage out, right? If you put bad data to learn from in AI, then you get bad outcomes as well. So basically, who is responsible for data quality? And then it goes back to all of these owners and the data domain owners to work together to basically make it happen. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Tiankai. And just to make sure that we're bringing everybody along who's joining us in our webinar, and also want to answer Shree's question there. Tiankai, can you follow up with a specific example of that domain ownership? Like, what is it, like maybe from one of your clients that you've worked with? What's an example of a domain, an example of like one data product there?
Yes,
Like with
I think absolutely. And I think with domains, I realized that calling it a data domain can often be misleading. I've heard about companies and seen companies cluster domains by data capabilities. For example, you have a reporting domain, you have an AI domain, and you have another domain, which doesn't really work that way because a domain should be oriented by business value, right? And that means normally you would go by either the systems that are core for certain business processes, let's say a CRM system or an ERP system. But more likely, I see where it works is actually by business functions. So for example, you have a consumer sales domain, you might have a finance domain, you might have a product domain and a research development domain, depending on your industry. And basically, you then have to decompose almost the data sets that you have into oriented being towards these domains, because they are the subject matter experts for their domains, and they would be the best fits also to own their data products in that way. And yeah, I mean, I think clustering and segmenting domains is always the biggest challenge I've seen in kind of trying to make data mesh happen, because people don't often underestimate that it's actually the people part that's the most difficult in data governance and not the technical part. And without the necessary buy-in that Prashant already mentioned, and having the vision, shared vision together on how that should be operated in the future, domain orientation, domain segmentation is really hard. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. And so a concrete example, for instance, in that type of example that you mentioned, like a source-aligned domain, a source-aligned data product could be a data product that you extracted from an ERP system, which is a third-party system, but now you are translating it, standardizing to your organization's domain, right? And then a consumer-aligned fit-for-purpose data product could be something that you might be creating, let's say, to prepare for board meetings or BI reports, that type of thing, or a customer data product that's doing data analysis,
Exactly.
right? Something like that. Yes. Okay.
Exactly.
Awesome. Awesome. So then let's talk a little bit more. Prashant, if you can explain, like, so how does one if you can give some specific examples about how one can go about governing data products?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So I think, as Tink I mentioned about kind of, all the data products and domains, right? Then the next thing comes as like, define the strategy or rules or standard first, right? So let's say, I think, for example, I'll give a couple of examples like, hey, data products should have owner defined, or it should have 25 character description, right? Or it should have OKR attached to it. So you define all of the kind of standards or rules like centrally, right? And once you are done kind of defining all of those standards, then you start kind of implementing at the kind of, data product level, right? So that's how you should think. And from a governance aspect, right, there are other things you can do within the data product, right? Like, for example, health controls, right? Or you see the overall health, like how the data product is evolving. Also see like the data quality scoring, right? Like, hey, what's the data quality score look like for my each of the data product across all the domains, right? So those are all the different things from a strategy aspect and from the tooling aspect. That's how you kind of govern the data product, actually.
Got it, got it. And by the way, I want to remind our attendees that Aria is doing some, for those of you who are visual and want to actually see this captured also on paper, feel free to pin Aria's Win box and you can see it maximized as well. So you can see as you're listening to our wonderful panelists. So, okay, great, Prashant. So like there's these global policies that are providing governance requirements for data products, and then there's tooling supporting executing on that is what I'm hearing. So there's a component of centralization and decentralization, and maybe even federation happening here. So Tiankai, if you can, what do you think, like what works and when do you use one versus the other from your experience?
Yes, I think that's the everlasting tension here between centralization and decentralization, right? I think when you centralize, of course, you have all of the experts together and they know exactly what they're doing, but that is easily becoming a bottleneck because they are supposed to service the whole business side of things and all of the requirements. So it's not really a scalable approach. Whereas if you decentralize, then it's the most scalable, right? Because then every function is taking care of their own business and data needs and create their own thing. But then you also almost lose the harmonization and the interoperability because not all of the data sets and data products might work together. So the key really is federation to put on top, right? I think in today's world, there probably isn't any of the extremes. It's really about every organization finding the right balance between centralization, decentralization, and how much to complement it with federation, right? And that means, for example, that in a data mesh sense, if you really want to go for different data domains and they're having their own data products, then where do the data domains coordinate across each other, right? How do they define policies that are applicable for all 4 of their domains, not just for one of them? And how do they ensure they have the same data standards, for example, to make sure that all of the data products are interoperable? And this is, I think, where really there's no one-size-fits-all approach to it. But no matter what we choose, it's always a trade-off. And we need to just be confident to make a choice. And I think we have to treat it also a bit more learning by doing style, right? To learn from what doesn't work. And if we need to, almost like a pendulum, swing back and forth a little bit to find the right ground, we should be agile enough in our organizational structures and processes to do so.
Great, thank you. Prashant, other thoughts and ideas on this balance between centralization, decentralization? And centralization, our industry's been doing for decades, and decentralization is also a newer thing. So maybe also if you can explain a little bit, like some of the hiccups that come with decentralization that could, be countered today.
Yeah, let me talk about our own Microsoft journey. Like, we have lived through all these three different models, like centralized, decentralized, and federation, right? And the learning here is most of the organization, as you mentioned, start with the centralization, right? And then it's gated through single team, and they run into scaling problems. So the very first thing is the business agility and the scaling problem, right? And the other thing is, now when we think about federation, the big value here is, like, let's say pick couple of domains, like HR domain having its own local kind of a state regulations, right? So that regulations may not be applicable to other domains, right? So now let's say we have some global kind of a controls and we have some local, right? So in the federated model, the hybrid model, we get that flexibility, like managing the local control as well as the global kind of a state regulations or whatever, right? So that's the big value add on the federation side. And the other thing is, now I want to share a couple of practical implementation learnings, right? So when you think about this hybrid model, right? First of all, it's a journey, right? It's not overnight thing, right? It's a journey, right? And couple of best practices. You don't need to start with all the domains at the same time. Pick a domain where you see most risk or sensitive data, right? Or pick a domain where kind of, it's most appropriate, it's revenue driven or something like that, right? So you start with one domain, right? And you don't need like a massive amount of kind of a domain, kind of a standards day one. Start with only like 2 or 3 domain standards and scale kind of, next level. So that's how you can think about, like, success on the federating model. And as think I mentioned, like, there is no one size fit all, depends on the organization's size, like a small, medium, large, and depends on the business, kind of how the business operating today, like what's the maturity of the business. But I have seen when they started deploying the federated model, they defined some sort of practice principles, and then they keep on kind of iterating on that will help them kind of from the success aspects.
Okay, excellent. So really be intentional about your phased journey. Don't try to do a big, bang thing, and be mindful of which domains you choose early, and then you expand and shift to additional domains. Okay, great. And so now in terms of still that balance between centralized and decentralized, I see that there's also manual efforts, and then there's things that we can automate, especially for decentralizing it, and even if we weren't, right, just in terms of scaling. So maybe Tiankai, if you can talk to us a little bit more about that, like concretely, what are you seeing, and your learnings also about where to automate, where to still keep human in the loop in these processes.
Yes, absolutely. I think that when we think about traditional data governance, where it was a lot about being compliant to policies, but then having audits basically to check if everyone is following those policies or not, that was a highly manual process, right? So you almost had like data governance people coming into a project and just almost like the police checking if everything is correct or not, and then either say, no, you cannot continue, or okay, you get a pass, you can move on. But as Prashant and I just mentioned before, scalability is then not given, right? You cannot do it for more and more data efforts or in parallel and go as an audit team in every single one to make sure that that happens. So that means that we have to think about data governance less as a push approach, right? Really about pushing yourself into auditing things, but more as a pull approach, meaning that there should be almost like a technological automation layer of governance mechanisms where all of the data efforts and any creation of data products then pulls the right guardrails automatically from it. And what that means, for example, right, is that if you have defined a data classification policy, right, where you know that certain data points are always personal identifiable information, certain data points are always confidential financial information about your organization, you can already pre-define rules for them that they should not be accessed by certain people, they should not be shared in a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. Once you have defined those rules, you can apply them as rules across all of the data products by already setting it up in the data platform, right? So whenever a data product then is specified afterwards and being created, the data classification can be pulled from a data catalog, for example, to identify what it is. And based on the rules that are applied on the data policy, on the data platform, it automatically only allows you a certain level of access that is then connected to the Active Directory, which tells you that only certain people are allowed to get access to it or not. Basically, turning that whole manual process of checking afterwards if everyone is allowed to have access into a prevention mechanism rather than a mitigation mechanism afterwards. And I think with technologies today, like a data catalog, but also data quality tools and data integrity monitoring tools, access management tools, all of these tools can really help with that. And I think one last point to it is that contrary to popular belief, data governance has a lot of tedious parts to it too, right? And I think people who work in data governance like us actually want to not focus on the tedious part, but more on the more exciting part of critical thinking and making the right decisions. So as much as we can use automation for the recurring tedious part, the better. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. I also want to remind people, so we have a few more questions that we have, but please post your questions in the Q&A tool, and then we'll be able to go through and take time to answer your questions as well. So Tiankai, that was interesting when you were talking also about the push and pull model. So the pull model, the way you were describing it, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like there are some automated guardrails that are kind of off the shelf in the marketplace, essentially, right? In the organization, you would have teams that being able to, you democratize that, and then teams are able to selectively choose which makes sense for them. Can you go a little bit deeper and maybe explain a little bit of how does that manifest itself? Like how do these automated guardrails for data products, right, come to being, and what could that look like?
Absolutely. I think, I mean, I will go a little bit into just the roles of the data platform and the data product teams, right? So in the, let's say, the ideal data mesh world, the data platform team is there to enable self-service capabilities, right? You kind of want to empower the scalability, meaning that certain other departments and domains are allowed to create their own data products in the most intuitive way, which means you have to have these self-service capabilities on the platform. And when these the domains and data product owners create their data products, they use these self-service capabilities to create the data products. And this is where the guardrails come in, right? So when these self-service capabilities are provisioned, they already are not completely free for all, but they, of course, already have the limitations in place. Meaning, as I mentioned before, right, if it's about personal identifiable data, those guardrails in place, the self-service capabilities recognizes that you want to build a product with, let's say, consumer or employee data. So it tells you directly that you cannot do it in completely raw format, but it's going to be anonymized or masked or obfuscated in a certain way. And this is how you're going to create your data product on it. And I think with other parts, like data quality monitoring, that is the case too, right? By having prioritized classifications of data, like, for example, critical data elements versus not so critical data elements, you might have a more prioritized data quality measurement of it. Same with master data, for example, being more priority than other data types potentially. And you can also cascade rules into how data quality should be measured for these specific data objects as soon as a data product wants to build a product around these data objects. And thereby, then you get immediately a data quality monitoring and a data quality tool. The mitigation process is also in place because you have identified the right responsibilities and ownerships and accountabilities. So basically, creating a data product can automatically then have all of the guardrails in place. And as a data product owner, you just have to follow what the guardrails tell you, and you don't have to find out everything uncertainly. Yes.
Excellent. And then actually just mapping that to the previous question I asked you as well, just so we connect the dots, because you were talking about the different roles at play. So with these automated guardrails, what I'm hearing is that there is, yeah, if you can unpack that for us, like who do you see building them? Who do you see using them? Who do you see selecting them? Yeah.
Yes. So I think it all starts with, let's say, the business requirements and how business is prioritizing different data objects above another, which means the data domain owners together decide on it across their domains and within their domains. So this is where it starts. Based on how certain data objects are more important than others, you would start differentiating what those guardrails should look like, right? So again, people data should be treated in a certain way, financial data should be treated in a certain way, confidential R&D information should be treated in a certain way. So all of those are defined on a business level of who should be allowed to have access to it and what is allowed to be done with them. Once those are basically defined by the data domain owners, the data platform team looks into how they can actually be translated into technical guardrails, right? Meaning really development and tools, writing them into codes, and how to embed them into the self-service capabilities. And then basically the data platform team is responsible for implementing those. And finally, the data product teams and the data product owners, when they create data products, they are using those guardrails, right, while implementing using the self-servability products. So they are then basically automatically responsible that the guardrails are being kept in place and that the data products are following what was defined before.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tiankai, for that.
Sure.
And so, Prashant, when we're looking at this, so, transitioning, with centralized ways of governing and implementing the governance to what Tiankai just walked us through of the different roles now and the decentralized teams also deciding, consuming, and using as well. Where do you see this? Like, where is the industry at? Because, now we have to do a lot more self-serve experiences and democratize it for people who maybe are not as experts in certain data engineering capabilities. So where do you see the maturity of these tools in the industry when we're supporting data as a product from a governance perspective?
Yeah, so first of all, I couldn't agree more with Tiankai on the strategy or kind of defining the rules, standards. So technology alone cannot do this. So that's the very first thing. But from I think, industry tooling perspective, right? So I think most of the tooling or technologies are maturing or evolving in this space. Let me give you a couple of examples based on, partners like you, based on your partners and customers' feedback, and based on our internal Microsoft journey implementation of governance. Our new data governance experience is completely redesigned in Microsoft Purview, right? And our focus is to help achieve business users implementing that federated aspects of it. That's where we are focusing. So you can do all of your kind of, domains, subdomains, and then focusing on those data product aspects, right? So we implemented a lot of capabilities around like data products and domain specific, right? And we are also kind of infusing the AI on top of it, right? Like a co-pilots, like so business users can ask natural language questions on top of their kind of whenever they are searching or doing discovery for a specific business analytics requirement, right? Now, on top of that, along with Microsoft Purview, couple of other kind of platform I would like to highlight is the Microsoft Fabric, right? Where the Fabric helps kind of unifying the data and also helps like a, from a collaboration, so data sharing aspects, right? And the One Lake Data Hub and One Lake, those are all the other features that are highly kind of, combined with the Purview data governance aspect, right? So both of them helping, business users from a federated and all the aspects actually.
And so for those who maybe may not know, but maybe everyone does, I don't know, but like, so can you just explain Purview and what its capabilities are? And then the ecosystem of the Microsoft tools that you just talked about, right? So each is integrating with Purview, correct? And Purview being sort of the center in that ecosystem. Is that how you are viewing it, Prashant? And maybe you could talk a little bit more about Purview.
Yeah. So the way the Microsoft Purview, right? It's a family of product. Like it's not only just governance, but we are thinking as a connected business problem. For example, compliance, risk, security, and governance. So all of them are kind of together in a one product family, right? And that's where the Microsoft Purview helps, right? So in the most of the capabilities, like earlier, as you mentioned about that centralization, but now our focus is more like how can we be more business user friendly, how it can help business users kind of, searching or doing the discovery. But we are also focusing on the CDOs kind of a personas, like where data officers or CDOs, right? They can do the high level of, they can see the, health of the entire business domains, like all the business domains from a data quality, from a OKR and all the perspective, right? So that's where the Microsoft Purview comes in, and it's heavily kind of integrated with Microsoft Fabric, because within the Fabric ecosystem, we provide all the different kind of data governance capabilities, being it kind of a lineage, impact analysis, right? Or kind of a one-lake data discovery hub, those kind of features available within the Fabric as well, right? And I think the thing I mentioned about the data quality, right? So the big focus is like, hey, even if I'm using some data in my reports, but is it kind of trustworthy or reliable, right? So we have some features around certification or endorsement. So whenever business users kind of really using this data, they know like, oh, it's endorsed or certified by particular domain or department, right? So that those are the other kind of capabilities within the Fabric and Purview together.
Excellent. Thank you, Prashant. So there's more that we can actually discuss, and I want to give you guys opportunity of that. But I also want to take in a few questions that are coming in because our attendees are, patiently waiting on some of these really great questions, actually. So please keep the flow going. But one of them we touched upon very briefly, but I think, one of the biggest challenges is when we're implementing data governance, right, into an organization. And, people just may not see that as a priority. There's a lot of competing priorities in an organization, and people, there's business value streams there's external customer facing things. And this is an internal, I don't know, house cleaning type of thing at times. Yeah. So how do you overcome this? What is that narrative? And there's change resistance as well. So if you guys can talk about that to get that buy-in. So yeah, Tanka. Take a step.
Yes.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. It all comes down, I think, to positioning and communication, right? The way I try to think about how you communicate and position data governance, you have 3 layers. So I think the one that is most common ground is the pain points layer, right? So basically, we know have complaints about data quality, or we are afraid of the regulations. We don't know what to do with our data. That's the pain point layer. And then you have, let's say, if you go more towards strategic layer, you have the business impact layer, right? So that means, okay, data quality problems, yes. They cost us $500,000 per month, for example, because we have to manually clean them up afterwards. Or we are in the danger of getting a $1 million fine because we're not meeting the regulation requirements. And then you have the underlying layer, actually, which is the root cause layer, I would call it, which is why, what can we do actually, and why is it happening that way? Where do the data quality issues come from? Why are we having that regulatory risk? Which can be tied down to a technical issue or a human misunderstanding issue or any kind of responsibilities issue, missing ownership, all these kind of things. And talking about the 3 layers, I think what executives really care about is the impact layer, right? They want to know how much do they get from data governance. But as data people, you usually tend to go to the kind of root cause layer. You talk about all of the nice things that you can do. We need to do ownership. We need to do quality monitoring. We need to define rules, blah, 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 blah. And to bridge that gap, I think that is really the key. Like, change the mindset to also work with your stakeholders to quantify the issues that you're solving as data governance and not talk about too much about what you're doing in data governance. This is what the executives really care about. And that requires a change in mindset, in a way, a change of communication. But I think this is what I've seen at least work for most of the clients and also with myself, to just speak the language that executive speaks and don't try to educate them about how data people speak, but kind of adapt yourself to it.
Excellent. Prashant, anything you wanted to add to that?
I think only I would add is the business alignment, right? So in that business alignment, when somebody defines the high level OKR, right, in the organization, like, hey, what's our key priorities, right? And sometimes those OKRs or key priorities, you can attach to the data governance solution and prove that value actually. So that's why we are adding these capabilities. Earlier, like, we haven't had OKR, but now we see the trend, like most of the companies operating with the OKR. So we provided that additional capability, even in the Microsoft purview, like attached to that OKR to the kind of your data product or domain level, actually. So you can track the progress in terms of business level, right? Not the just technical level.
Okay, excellent. So to combine those, right? So what I'm hearing is like Tiankai is giving us some good tips in thinking about a layered narrative to bring forth to executives and addressing the pain points of strategic and the impact and so forth. And Prashant, you're saying now, how do we trickle that down across the organization to scale the change? You need overcome change resistance throughout. And by the trick there is to really, can you put it into the OKRs? Because OKRs are what people are measured against and really focused on a quarterly, monthly, whatever basis. Okay, that's great. Is that how you see that as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, excellent. So, and if you guys have follow-up questions, please feel free to add also to the Q&A as well. So I think let's transition a little bit. There is a question about metadata and handling metadata. So Paolo is just asking, if you guys could share your learnings and expertise on this. How would you approach handling metadata in a data platform environment? And is the industry federating technical metadata by capabilities?
Yes, I would start with that. So I think the very first step, from a metadata standpoint, you define like what's your metadata strategy. Now, metadata, there are a lot of different categories of metadata, whether it's a business metadata, technical, operational, or auditing. So define like what kind of metadata are you talking about, right? So once you have that metadata strategy, that helps you kind of from a discovery aspect, because sometimes the normal metadata doesn't help. You need to kind of decorate your data with some additional custom attributes kind of a thing, right? So define that strategy, right, which will help your business users to discover the data faster, actually, right? Now, one thing I have seen different patterns, like let's see if it's a large organization, they might have a different data catalogs, maybe different technologies. So they have a different metadata across all the different tools or technologies. At that point, you may run into kind of synchronization of all the different metadata in a single kind of a unified catalog, and then provide a business user kind of interface on top of it, right? So if it's a single unified metadata catalog, then it's easy. But otherwise, you may need to do like a federated metadata catalog where you need to synchronize the metadata between all the different catalogs in a simple single platform, actually. So that's how you should kind of look at it. Yeah. Tinkai, please add. Feel free to add on that.
Sure. I think, completely agree to that. I was thinking also about specifically metadata in the data platform environment is what Paulo is asking for, right? And I think maybe just to go on that point, I think there's a interaction model that you have to define what the relationship between the data platform metadata is, because it goes in both ways, right? On the one hand side, the data platform itself needs metadata to describe what's in the data platform. So how do you generate the right metadata that describes what's in the platform, what's ingested, etc. But at the same time, the data platform can rely on metadata to already define these guardrails that we talked about before, right? So if we think about business rules or data quality rules in the business language or a technical code language already, or about data classification that's already sitting in the data catalog, then the data platform can pull it from the data catalog to already basically automatically create those guardrails on top, right? So in that way, I think there's, again, another like push and pull mechanism between a data catalog and a data platform. You just need to define how it works in the right way to make that happen. And I think with the technical metadata by capabilities, that's a really interesting sub-question of it. I think, it depends a little bit of what is meant by capabilities in this case. But if I understand it correctly, by platform capabilities, then you really have they all should connect to the metadata strategy, right? That Prashant just mentioned. So if we think about self-service capabilities, right? And you have one of them is basically, let's say, pipeline monitoring, right? that is ingesting metadata as well as producing metadata, ideally, because then you know how well the pipelines have been running. And if another one is rather just access management as a capability, then again, that is producing metadata by seeing log files of who has actually accessed it, but also it pulls in metadata again to know who should have access and who doesn't. So basically all of that putting together, the interaction model should be defined, and that's how it should work in the platform environment.
Okay, great. And as I'm hearing you speak to some of the examples of metadata here on the technical side as well, seems like there's different ways of perhaps categorizing them. I mean, in addition to what we've done before, like business metadata, technical metadata, and so forth, I think there is also additional maybe subcategories of dynamic metadata that is generated through the platform, right, as you're speaking about, as well as those that may be more statically associated with a particular version of a data product. And so forth. So there's a lot of opportunity here as we're advancing the field in this. So I think that's great. And there's metadata, of course, that also allow us to connect, ensure the findability, accessibility, interoperability, right? So each metadata is corresponding to the characteristics of the data product that we're developing. Excellent. So I just want to go broad strokes because there is another different topic that also has been coming out in the Q&A, and then we'll come back to other topics. But one is just around AI. Jan is asking, how, if at all, does the guardrailing approach work with AI systems such as LLMs? Now, with LLMs, right, they seem to thrive best on ingesting everything indiscriminately and have been known to be susceptible to be tricked into dumping out parts of their training data. So, just curious, right, as the industry is evolving and LLMs is becoming even more prevalent, how are you guys seeing that might still work with the guardrailing approach?
Yeah, I can give it a start. I think why I'm smiling a little bit is because of the wording of thrive best. It depends on how you define best in that scenario, right? But generally, maybe what would help is to maybe zoom out a little bit just to illustrate what I mean by how LLMs and governance should play together. So the way I see it, if you think about data governance and AI governance, which is the new buzzword on the world, right? I think there are like three buckets. One is data governance in the classical sense, where you have the data quality. So basically, the data should be at least complete, accurate, and correct, right? To be then used as learning data for AI models. And then you have AI model governance, where LLMs also fit into, where you actually govern the models themselves, of them being explainable, having high quality, being accurate, and creating the right output and outcome, right? But you also have a middle part, which is I would call learning data governance, because when you judge data based on how learnable they are for machine learning, for example, then you have different criteria than you have in the traditional governance sense. Meaning, is there bias in there? Is discrimination in there? And these are, I think, really new aspects that data governance has not really defined in an industrial standard yet. But I think just the consciousness to say that learning data, data that's being learned from, needs a new view on it, on how to be judged and how to be governed, that's really clear. And that is also playing into LLMs. In that sense, so how do we put guardrails on there, right? So again, I think on data governance, we talked a lot about it already. I think with the AI models, I think you can have processes where you just have more human oversight, basically looking into the models, making sure they're explainable, they have lower risk, and you kind of work with legal counterparts maybe, and your, let's say, HR counterparts look into what's going on. But for the learning data itself, this is where it gets tricky, because who defines if this one is biased or not, and who defines what should be automated at guardrails and isn't? So I would actually suggest on that one to create your own, let's say, criteria of how to judge your learning data and how you define how LLMs are safe or not, and how they are ethically agreeable or not with you. And for now, get started, but have that conversation first internally to be able to then develop those guardrails. So when you then actually want to implement them, the data that's being used for LLMs to learn from can go through an additional level of these monitoring and assessments before they're being learned from to go into production.
Great. And Tiankai, we see in the industry that there are evolutions and experimentations, but also now further advancements in testing and evaluating LLMs. There's, thinking about, let's say, decomposing RAG and thinking about the search part differently from the LLM part, and so recall precision. There's TDD for LLMs that's also coming out. So are you seeing that evolution as well? Because when we're talking about automation of these guardrails, are you anticipating that these advancements therefore can lead to that?
Absolutely. I think, and what you call advancements, I see also the trend of decomposing it and not generalizing everything anymore, which is actually a really good part of it, right? Because the more you actually specify sub aspects of it and into sub capabilities almost, the more the consciousness grows that in different scenarios you actually need to apply governance in different ways. So it absolutely helps. I think thinking about how I would act upon it as a data governance person, if I know more specifically what an LLM is being used for and in what context it's being used for, the better I can actually help you because it has much clearer requirements than before, and we cannot generalize the rules just for everything all the time, right? So I think that advancement is really helping. Yeah.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think the sort of like the unit test approach to the different aspects of LLMs, right? And then the integration test approach, right? So that combination and applying that.
Exactly.
Great. Prashant, just stepping back, like where do you see AI impacting data governance overall? I mean, as you see from the industry trends.
Yeah, let me pick a couple of examples, like let's say like a Copilot implementation, right? So let's say if you are doing any custom Copilots, or I would say, as somebody asked about LLM-based applications. So in those areas, right, we do like a lot of prompt engineering or RAG-based architecture, right? And that's where like we have a lot of capabilities around like, how we, because whatever the data we are feeding in this prompt engineering, are they like, sensitive or those kind of things, right? So there are a lot of kind of guardrails or monitoring capabilities coming in, right? To get your foundation ready. So I would suggest to check, like one of the thing is AI Hub. So recently we launched like AI Hub, which will help kind of whatever LLM based applications you are developing, right? That will help you monitor your guardrails and those kind of thing, right? So, but specifically, I think I see a lot of trend around custom Copilot implementation, right? And all of them are kind of, again, focusing more on the data foundation or data culture side, actually. Yep.
Great. We have just a few minutes left, and I think questions are still trickling in. But Tiankai, there was one specifically with your name on it. So it says, once decentralized, how do you deal with non-compliant external users, given that you can't control and impose sanctions on them?
Great question. I think that starts with how you define the necessity and the requirements of external access, first of all, right? Like independent of what domains are allowing external access or not. There has to be an overarching point of view on why external access is needed and for what purposes. So if we think about the general ownership approach that we just talked about, right? That cross-domain alignment should clarify what external access is needed and in what scenarios external access should be allowed or not. So ideally, when external access then is granted, that already happens under the guardrails, right? Because they're based on how the data is classified and how users are classified. That should already lead to a decision if external access is allowed to the specific data set or not. I think additionally, of course, with automated guardrails, that's one approach. But I would say I doubt that it still fixes all of the risks. So some more consciousness and training for data product owners that are identified of having data that is risky and that should not go to the wrong hands, for example, would be good. Having them being informed about the policy, giving some more hands-on training on how to deal with unauthorized access, I think would be good. So basically complement the automated guardrails with some human training and human upskilling. That would be the best approach.
Okay, excellent. And also like maybe also the point of the question is also that they're external users. So I think, as you said, if you can't control it fully, that's where legal regulations might also need to come into play, and what your organization may sign when they publish the data for external usage as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
yeah, go
just
ahead.
quickly on that note, though, that is a good one, because in Europe, at least, you have GDPR, right? And you have data protection officers legally binding that are responsible for it. So it's anywhere in their biggest interest that there's, at least for personal information, that access is not easily given. So as soon as you have these alignments before about policies, the data protection officer is anyway involved. So that should at least already make clear who's responsible and accountable for it. And then you define the guidelines. Yes.
Excellent. So we're going to be closing our webinar soon. So just a final question I'll ask for both of our wonderful panelists here, and a coupling with Pooja's question that she's posted here, where she's really, helping us bring back the conversation to value. So like, she's saying, with all the different capabilities to organize and govern the data, how successful are our companies at the end of the day? Is the bottom line improving? Is the data that we're providing, for example, to data scientists really bringing the valuable insights? So I'm just going to ask each of you. We could start with Prashant, if you have any take on that question, plus any final words of advice that you want to share for our audience.
I think the key thing here is the data-driven culture, right? Because right now, let's say most of the business, if they are taking some decisions, but maybe it's not based on the right data, right? So you can look at a lot of different studies around Forrester study or a lot of studies, but most of them are giving those stats like, hey, if we embrace the data-driven culture with the use of governance and other capabilities, business seeing a lot of kind of revenue or kind of a lot of improvements on top of it, right? So that's how I would look at it. Now the other aspect is the data collaborations and the data sharing aspects. So those are the key areas, key takeaway from this actually. Yeah.
Excellent. And Tiankai, for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a lot about both the human side and the automation side of things. I hope that also that's what the audience takes away from it, that basically find the right balance between making the right decisions through collaboration and cross-functional alignment with the right automation is really the key aspects to making governance future-proof and successful. And I think, I mean, in the end, I always define data governance as making data trustworthy for everyone, because it really emphasizes the human element of it, right? Like as soon as data is trustworthy, then everyone actually wants to work with the data again, and that should lead to the right decisions. So yeah, that would be my key takeaway from here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, both of you. Wonderful discussion. Really enjoyed it. I hope everyone who's here right now with us or watching afterwards got something out of this. We got a chance to learn from both Prashant and Tiankai from their experiences, talking about developing that data-driven culture so that it does lead to that value, the business outcomes, and it's holistically senior leadership support with change, throughout the organization, to get that trustworthy data, right, as we're talking about, and data as a product, as that unit of change, as that unit of development, as that unit of governance, which we talked about and we unpacked today. And we're transitioning the industry from centralization to decentralization. And how do we do that with platform, with the self-serve capabilities, and that ecosystem of tools? Microsoft has one with Purview, and that ecosystem, other places you will have other ecosystems. And really that change at the end of the day, the value articulations, that layered way of communicating to the senior execs, as Tiankai shared, the OKRs to scale the changes throughout the organization, as Prashant shared, and the phased approach. So with that, I hope you guys got some tools, some ideas, some thoughts to bring that change and that business value that the industry is really needing throughout within your organizations and throughout the industry with that trustworthy data. So with that, we want to conclude and just want to welcome Diodona if you wanted to add any final words for
Yeah, thank you so much, Nimisha, to our amazing panel today. That was very insightful conversation. I can see that this is the topic that's something that definitely resonated with the audience, but of course, all good things must come to an end. I'd like to extend our gratitude on behalf of the Authors Club to everyone for taking the time to participate and to Thoughtworks for making all of this possible. We definitely hope this session has sparked some thoughts, and we encourage everyone to keep in touch moving forward. Once again, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Thank you.